Alright, so today we're going to be talking about lighting. Now, until now, we've pretty much just used one light source, the sun. Okay, and that's all good. It's really good for exterior scenes. It's realistic depending on what your lighting model is. However, if we're doing especially internal scenes or night scenes, we need to light them artificially. We can actually also light external scenes in very cunning ways, and I'll talk about that later on in the class. But right now, what I want to do is just describe the 4 different types of lights we have, starting off with the sunlight. Okay, so the sunlight is a parallel light, okay, and it appears in here as a sunlight. However, we can actually have multiple suns, if you like, or multiple parallel lights, which can be quite handy, especially if you're using a very simple rendering method. And let's put that there, and we'll just move the sun closer, just so it's a little bit easier to reach. Where's my scene here? Okay, cool. There you go. Just makes it a little bit easier for me to see everything now. Okay, so here's my parallel light. So the light is traveling, if you like, in parallel beams. So that means that my shadow won't get bigger or smaller depending on where the light is. It's going to stay parallel. In actual fact, the sun is a point light. However, by the time it reaches Earth, the beams are so parallel because of the distance involved, we just can treat it as being parallel light. If we want more parallel lights, see this guy here? We can have a second one. Now you'll actually, the parallel light in here is actually treated separately. Oh, hang on. Let's drop that down. There we go. Okay, and you can tell it what to point to. So at the moment it's pointing at the camera, but you can switch that off, and then you can just move it around and rotate it all as you wish. Although pointing at camera is much simpler. Yeah, let's put that there. So we could use this maybe as a fill. Okay. So now I've got, here's my key light and my fill light, if you like. Okay, so maybe my fill, well, there's no actual power involved in that, but that's alright. There's my sunlight, and there's my, notice it actually calls it directional light, but it has the same icon. So now if I render this, okay, I've actually got a bit of fill in there. Alright, so they can be quite handy. I'll talk about some other techniques that we can use that with as well. So let's just delete that directional light for now. And I'm going to set up a little scene here. In fact, I'm going to use this cube. I'm just going to make a little room, okay, because I want to darken this and I want to see the lights shining on different objects, etc, etc. Alright, so here's my little room. Alright. Let's just drop that. Drop that, cool. So I should have a nice little area to play inside. Let's just move that a bit closer to the camera. I know I could move the camera. But alright, I'm also going to drop the sun. So if we just go to the sun, just go drop -90. It's the easiest way to get rid of the sun. And I'm going to say not visible. And we should end up with a black sky. In fact, we've got nothing, which is kind of weird. Oh no, because we don't have any lights at all, which is good. That's what we want. Right, let's have a look in here. So I said that there was 4 major types of light. So the first one being the parallel light or the sunlight. The next 2 are actually one. This is a point light. So there's a single point light. Hang on, what's going on here? There we go. Let's just aim this up a bit. There we go. So here's my single point light. I'll put this into my scene. And you can see here that it's a point of light with all the light radiating out in different directions. Okay, 360 degrees. So point lights, it's kind of like a light bulb, if you like. Now, the source of this light is like infinitely small. Okay, so any shadow that it has will be sharp. So we'll pop that down there, and let's just do a quick render. So there we go. And there's our scene. Okay, now you can see our point light is far too bright. It's really overexposed here. Yes, I could go in there and underexpose my shot. However, it's much better idea to reduce the power of our point light. Okay, so this brings me into what settings we have. So first of all, we've got the color up here. So let's say this is like a tungsten filament. So I want to make it kind of a bit of a yellowy orange color. But just a hint of it. It's almost like a peachy color if you like. Alright, there we go. And I'm going to drop the power right down to 5 watts. I don't know if it's actually watts, but I always just call them watts. Now the softness, I need to talk about, actually I'll talk about that in a second. So now we've got 5 watts. Let's just set this up as final render quality, render to screen, and I'll just do a small render and go render. Alright. And there's my scene. So you can see it is actually doing a little bit of auto exposure here. So I'm going to switch these off because I like to see exactly what's going on here. Actually, I'll leave that natural film response off as well. Okay. So this is a linear light. What that means is that the light is brightest, well, at this point here, and then it drops off with distance in a linear fashion. So that means, you know, half the distance. So this is the limit of the light. So in fact, let's just see what happens. Okay, so if I go and put this light about here, right, actually I'll put it like this. As the light drops off over the distance, okay, it's an even decrease in power, if you like, which isn't actually very realistic. It should actually be quadratic. So, in fact, 2 ways of making quadratic light. You can go into here and go quadratic. It's actually exactly the same as me just hitting that button, and now that's a quadratic light. So a quadratic light means that it's really bright at its source, and then it evenly it's really bright and then drops real quickly, almost like an exponential curve. Okay, so it still gets a lot of travel, but it's very dim. So here you can kind of see the difference. Okay, and oops. So if I move this quite close to the ground, you'd see it's just as bright, but it's bright and then it drops off real quickly, but we're still getting light just heading out here. Now, I'm actually going to change this to radiosity because at the moment, this global ambience means that it's illuminating in everything with a little bit of light. So I'm going to just switch straight to global radiosity with all the default settings. And let's knock that one off again. Alright, that's more realistic. Okay, so you can see now we haven't, this light isn't bright enough to reach that back wall. Okay, it is bright enough just to reach there, but it's not bright enough to reach the back wall. Actually, what I might do, I don't usually use lens flares, but in this case it's quite handy just to illustrate where the light is. Okay, you can't actually see light. Light's completely invisible. You need the light to illuminate something before you can see it. So that could be particles in the air, like, you know, fog or mist, or an object. So because our world is basically a vacuum, I can't see the light unless I do something. Anyway, so now you can see where that point light is. So that's actually the lens flare, which I usually avoid. Alright, so let's change that now back to linear, and we'll see what the difference is. Okay, so that's linear. Okay, so there is, you can see that it's still as intense in here, but the drop off on the quadratic looks far more realistic. Alright, I'm going to light a scene later on, but just bear with me. Okay, so that's the difference between linear and quadratic. Now we also have the same thing with spotlights. So I'm just going to get rid of these other, that one and that one. So here's our spotlight. A spotlight is just like a point light, except it's being directed in one direction. Again, we have power, so I'm going to make that 5. Actually, I think it's 5 meters is actually what it means. So in theory, that probably won't quite reach the ground. Because I think it's about 6 meters up in the air, is it? 6.8. So it's just reaching the ground. Now, we've got a couple other settings. I'm just going to move this light so it's up against the wall a little bit so you can kind of see it. Alright. And we'll just kind of focus on it a bit more and move it down a bit. In fact, I might actually put it to a little bit of an angle. There we go. Okay, so we can kind of see what that's doing now. And let's just sort of zoom in on that. There we go. Alright. Now we've got a couple extra settings. So now we've got the spread. So the spread is basically turning it from a floodlight into a spotlight. Now generally though, if we have a floodlight, usually it's got kind of an area that's really bright and then it bleeds off, and that's what the fall off is. So if we play around with the fall off, see, so this is going to be full intensity and then going out to 0 intensity. And we've got the same thing happening in this direction as well. So let's just lift our camera up here a bit and render that off. Okay, so full intensity and it's bleeding off. So that's kind of more of a floodlight. And if I just drag a copy of this, move. So if we go and actually I'll just put it over to this wall over here and rotate it while holding the shift key, so we can rotate it 90 degrees. And this one, right, we're going to make the fall off basically. Well, let's go 0 or 5. There you go. Slight fall off. And the spread, it's going to be very narrow. If we just look around now, we'll see. There's that one. Okay, and you can see that that now is more like a spotlight. So there's a point of intense light and there's no drop off as we saw over here. Alright. Okay. And again we have quadratic versions of the same thing. Okay. So in theory the quadratic should look a lot more realistic. Again, I'm just gonna change both of these at the same time. Lighting quadratic. I'll come back to this menu in a second. Okay, so if I kinda might just shoot a bit wider, there we go. And now you can see this is with quadratic lights. So see how we can see that fall off, much more realistic. In fact, let's just undo that, undo, there we go. That full intensity and it's dropping off really rapidly. Now we can do some crazy things, of course. So I'm just going to take a point light and I'm going to put it across the wall over here, and let's just have a look at that. Again, I'm going to drop it down. Actually, I'll drop it down to a 10, so it looks like that. So again, this is in that lighting tab. You can see here we've got linear, quadratic. We've also got custom though, and what we can do, if I go and edit this filter, I can actually change this. So maybe I want a light that's really intense. So this is currently linear. It's really intense up to a point, and then it just drops off rapidly. There we go. See, so this is kind of the inverse of the quadratic. Let's just do that over 5 meters so we can kind of see the result. Okay, so it's really bright and then it just drops off. So you can make up your own sorts of lights as well. If we compare that to normal, well, let's say compare it to quadratic. Full intensity, it seems to be going a bit further though. That's probably to do with my, what did I make the other one? 5, didn't I? That should be a bit better comparison. Okay. Alright, I think that's enough of the boring stuff. Let's get on to the more interesting stuff. This here is called an area light. Now, an area light, you need to have the switch to radiosity. I believe so. I don't think it'll do anything if I don't have it as radiosity. Let's just have a look around here. So here's my area light. Now this is basically like a fluoro light if you like. Let's just rotate this around. So what's happening is it's a panel of light and the entire thing is emitting light. So this is a lot more complicated. Okay, because there's lots of photons, if you like, being beamed out. Let's just rotate this around a bit like that. Actually, I'll pop a little cube in the center there, eh? Oh, sure, I've got one over there still, haven't I? Let's get him, and we'll just drop him onto the ground plane. Alright. Okay, so that's what a panel light does. Now, see how we've got this really soft shadow? If you like, there's photons being beamed out in different directions. So it's like as if you had millions of little point lights all beaming out light in different directions. So this is a really awesome type of lighting model. However, it does cost. Let's just drop that down to 5 again. Okay, maybe that was too low, but anyway, you get the idea. You can kind of achieve the same thing, though. Let's say we're going to drop point light in there, right? We'll just delete the, actually we'll just switch the panel light off by using this thing called softness. So softness, what it's actually doing, so let's say we go and change this to 25 degrees, which is quite high actually. I normally wouldn't go that high, but I just want to kind of show it off. What it's doing is it's kind of doing this a similar thing. Alright, sorry, I got interrupted there. Okay, so let's just drop this point light down, I think is what I was doing, wasn't it? So we just drop that down to, let's say 10. We do the trick, maybe 15. That should do the trick. You can actually see this going out to here, so it should be approximately the same. So here's my indirect lighting pass, that's what's done by the radiosity. And again, see, you can see it's a soft light source. So it's kind of similar to this, although the brightnesses are different. You get a general idea. Pretty cool. Alright, so that's soft lights. Now the problem with soft lights, of course, is render time. So soft lights and panel lights and things like that will take a lot longer to render. Okay, this is a very simple scene, but you know, you can kind of see that if we go back to some of these early renders, where are we? This one is 2 seconds. Okay, yeah, so we're quadrupling our render times. All right. So now we can actually turn any object as well. So let's have a little play here. We can turn any object into a light source as well. So let's grab some text, right? And we'll call this land 6340. Cool. Let's get a. That'll do. Maybe not quite so deep. There's the extrusion. Okay, that's not making it any smaller. Nice, it is. Okay, there we go. So here's my object. Let's just drop that into our scene. I'll put it up against the wall here. Actually, I'll leave it just a little bit outside of the wall, right? Oops, I also need to drop it down. There we go. I'm just going to delete these light sources. Okay, so I've got no light source. Now, if you right click on this and go Object, Convert to Area Light. Now that there is a light source. And there it is. Okay, maybe slightly too bright, but you get the general idea. Again, if I drop that down, see this one would have to be quite low. Otherwise we won't be able to read it. There you go, land 6340 as a light. Only problem is you can't convert it back again. So if you convert something, oh actually look, back to polygons. No. Yeah, so for some reason, once it's an area light, it is forever an area light. So, don't know why. But, pretty cool. Alright. So those are our major light sources. Okay, I just want to go back now. Let's grab this point light. Actually, no. I'm going to do a couple little things here. Let's just add a couple more things to our scene. So let's pop a tree in here. I'm not sure what kind of tree I'm going to get. Oh, is it the elder, is it? Yep. So I just want to make the scene just a little bit more complicated. Okay. There's a few things we need to talk about here. Alright. So there's our scene. Looking pretty cool. Now, let's actually we'll just switch this light off, and I'm going to grab a spotlight, and we're going to have a little bit of a play around with this. So first of all, I'm just going to put that right about there. I can't actually see that. Yeah. So that's all I've got, right? Let's just drop the power of that down to, let's say 20. And we'll do a little bit, oh, I've got a little bit of fall off on there already. So that's looking pretty cool. So this is what we've got. Boom. Okay, we can't see the tree in the background, we can't see bugger all because it's not being illuminated at all. So, let's have a look at all the settings we've got in here. So, first thing is lens flare. So yes, you can have a lens flare. It's not going to do anything in this case. Although, it looks like we might have a little bit of a haze. No, nothing. Okay, lens flares should be avoided. They are very cheesy. The only time I do one in software is if you've got lights going through objects, like, you know, through the trees or clouds or something like that, and you really want a lens flare. But yeah, you don't really want one. Alright, we'll come back to lens flares with the point lights, a little bit easier to demonstrate. Okay, gels. Gels are really cool. First of all, let's put a flat gel on here. We're going to go edit material. Hang on. Alright, sorry, I got interrupted again. Okay, so we're loading up a gel. So a gel is actually, or gel or a gobo, is basically an image that's going to get placed in front of the lens. So let's say I'm just going to load in something real simple here. Let's say, what have we got here? Distributed patterns, round samples. No, that's a bit boring. How about leopard? Cool, I'm just going to drop that in. So now we will actually see that our spotlight is in fact rendering. Look at that, lots of little dots. Kind of like a disco light, really, isn't it? Okay, so we can put gels on our light. So if you were trying to do something, you know, kind of a little bit more arty or spectacular, you can put those on there, and it's a nice way. Especially if they're out of shot, you don't have to worry about what that actual light source looks like. But yeah, it looks pretty cool. All right, we'll leave that on there for now. Let's have a look at volumetric. Volumetric lighting, as I said before, you can't see light. So how do we make the light visible? Well, actually, now this will actually cast a volumetric light through a cloud or something like that. But we've also got this show smoke or dust in light beam. And if we just switch that on, boom, we can actually see the light. We should be able to. Might have to bump that up a bit. We can't quite see it there.
New data received.
Let's bump the intensity right up, so we should be able to see it a lot clearer now. Chin, 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 chin. There we go. And now we can actually see sort of dust and smoke in the light, which is pretty cool, isn't it? Now the other cool thing with this is that, actually I'm just going to switch this gel off for now. Okay, so that will look, just like a big beam of light, if you like. What's cool is that if I go and stick the spotlight over our tree here, okay, and we render that up, turn. The tree is making shadows in our volumetric light, and we get a very spectacular result. Now you can actually make the atmosphere really thick and smoky and foggy. That takes a long time to render, and it can be quite painful, to say the least. So the cool thing with this technique is it's actually relatively fast to render. Chin. Okay, so here's a beam of light coming down from our alien spaceship or something like that onto our tree that's going to get abducted. Okay, and you can see all these beautiful beams of light going through all the branches. Okay, and it's making a lovely shadow at the bottom there. So that's pretty cool. Now that took 23 seconds. There's actually another little technique we can use that sometimes speeds it up. I say sometimes it's exactly the same. It's this use shadow map. Now this is a different way of creating shadows. Now we can actually have lights that don't cast shadows, which you might think, well, what's the point of that? The idea is, like, for example, you might just want to have a light that just illuminates your scene, like almost like as if it was like an ambient light but directional. So you could actually have a light that didn't cast shadows, it just illuminates things. So you can actually switch your shadows off. And there's two ways of doing shadows. Ray traced, which means that it's actually going to shoot the beams of light through here and trace exactly where the beam of light hits the ground. Then we have shadow mapped, and what it does is it kind of creates an image that gets cast through it, and we can actually change the resolution of this image. I got a funny feeling that when I switched on the what do you call it, volumetric lighting, it switched on shadow maps automatically. We'll find out if it looks the same or not. In theory, this should speed up the whole process. But what I quite like about it is that it actually produces a much more sort of softer, See, so that's with a shadow map, and that's ray traced. Ray traced much more accurate. Shadow map not so accurate, but it kind of works at the same time. It doesn't really work that great on the tree, but you can see on the ground it looks really nice. Yeah, it's kind of a lot softer. Yes, I could, if I wanted to, make my spotlight soft. So let's say we just put a 5-degree soft shadow in there. Okay, and we'll change this back to being ray traced. And go, okay. So this would be a soft light, but this is going to blow our render time out. I might even have to. Oh, here we go. Now this is, remember, one light, one tree, one surface that's being illuminated. So that's using a soft light. It's actually looking pretty good. And why did it go so fast? Doesn't look that soft, does it? In fact, it looks identical. But anyway, what was this one? This was 18 seconds. The same settings was 23 seconds. So that was faster, but yeah, it looks kind of nice. I'm not sure why that rendered so fast. It shouldn't have. Ray traced. Anyway, we'll come back to those things. So we can do a shadow map. Now you can actually also change the size of it. So we go to shadow map. Let's say I'm gonna make this is, so it's actually an image that it's producing and then projecting through our scene. We can also actually change the dispersion. This is how the softness gets calculated. Light is quite good. Constant means that it'll be the same softness all the way through our entire scene. Light based means that it'll be sharper towards the light and softer as it gets further away. Object based is kind of, yeah, it's meant to be based on the object, but sometimes you get this weird stepping effect. So I don't tend to use that one. I usually just leave it on light based, and we can play around with the dispersion as well. So let's bump that up to 5 just to really show it off. This is also using a higher resolution for our shadow map as well. Alright, so it's looking pretty good. That was 19 seconds, which was pretty fast. So you can sort of see getting a lot more definition in the shadow, but only cost us 3 seconds. It's not that convincing, is it? But yeah. But anyway, so those are the different types of shadow maps. Alright. Where do I want to go from here? Let's actually, that's a good point. How come I can't? Oh, that's right, I switched him off, didn't I? We switch that back on again. That'd look kind of cool. Alright. Anyway, let's just go back into here. So that was shadows. So we've looked at volumetric gels, volumetric shadows, lighting. We can also do variable colored lighting, which is kind of a bit weird, but let's say we go and load in a, yeah, that'll do, colorful rainbow map over, let's say 10 meters. This is just going to be kind of weird and spooky. I'm not sure why you'd want to do this, but it'll be fun. Alright, and there we go. Actually, I was just thinking, it'd probably be quite good for underwater scenes, because with underwater scenes, you get a lot of colour in the shallow, and then slowly all the different wavelengths disappear until eventually you're left with blue light. So yeah, actually, I might have to try that one day. Alright, so yes, you can have variable colour as well in your lights. You'll probably find that if I looked up a bit more. I'd probably see the rest of the spectrum in there as well. Yeah, see, there's the rest of them up there. And we're getting a rather spooky looking scene. I suppose we switch our gel back on again. Alright. Now we're going to get a very spooky looking sort of spotted light. Hey, didn't do my spotted light thing. Oh, looks cool anyway. Oh, that's interesting, isn't it? How come my gel disappeared? Actually, you'll see in here it's got some pre-made gels somewhere. Light gels, there you go. Anyway, so that's getting kind of crazy. Alright, now let's have a look at a little technique here. I'm just going to create a new scene. Actually no, first of all I'll talk about relighting, which is very handy. So let's just drop a few other lights in here, right? Let's just drop these down to 10 and drop that height down, and I'm just going to drag out a bunch of these, right? We could make those volumetric, but I'm not going to. Oh, interruption again. Right, it's been one of those days. So, we're setting up a little scene here with a whole bunch of different lights, and we're going to do a technique called relighting, which is this little guy down here. It says enable relighting. And now we hit render, and all of our lights will get rendered out. Oh, that's our lighting pass, or indirect illumination pass I should call it. And here's our render pass. Now this technique is really good when you've got things that have rendered, they might have taken hours to render, and then it's like, there's too much light behind here. What can I do about it? Well, all we do, is this finished? Yep. We bring this up, and you'll notice, look at this, we've got relighting, and we can actually drop all sorts of things. In fact, if we go fully interactive, now your computer might freak out if you try and do this. This is a relatively small render, so it should be fine. But look, I can drop down that point light, and I can drop down this point light, and I can drop down this point light, which isn't in the scene. And we've got this spotlight over here. Now you can actually go above this if I went 2, so it's going to double it. Here's land 6340 over here in the background. Okay, and the sunlight, which obviously isn't doing anything. So, let's just tweak that. Now, the only thing is that I generally go, okay, that's kind of cool. And if you notice, all of these are, about a fifth lower than what I currently have them set to. So it's like, okay, so what have I got that set to? That escape zone. They're all 10, so let's make them. So if that was 10, it would be 0.15 for all of them. And then hit render again. So yeah, it's a great technique for tweaking the lights, but if you decide later, I can pop these all back again, it's much better to go and adjust it. It'll look heaps more realistic. Is it gonna? Yeah, see, well, they're much darker, aren't they? See, so, and again, you can kind of go, well, how about if we make these 2, 2, 2? So it's quite a handy technique. You can also try and play around with colouring the light as well. So you can change the colour of these lights to whatever you like. And if we like that, we can these. We can go and take that colour and pop it into here's the easiest option, because then you can just go. So we get these blue lights. But again, I would still actually go back here and say, well, let's actually make these lights twice as powerful and blue. Let's make that. Actually, I suppose it should have been 1.5, isn't it? Would have been the same. That's what I mean. It's 15%. Alright. And hit render. Very techno. It will remember what you had these settings at as well, so just remember you've got to come back here and go. Should actually have white in there by default, shouldn't I? It's actually more of a hue shift than anything, so it's not actually white light, it's just that it's not changing its hue at all. See, so if I made these ones that blue colour, shouldn't look too different. It's actually a little bit different around the trees. It's the way that the light's bleeding, really. You can see it is actually better having the light set correctly in the first place, but it's not that significant. It's probably got a lot to do with, I don't know, the lens glare. Hang on, we'll talk about that at some point. Well, you might as well talk about it now, although I'm not really going to see it with the settings as they are. In fact, let's show off what lens glare is, because it's one type of, so I'm just zooming right in here, right? Let's take this point light, I might have to make it a bit brighter. Let's take this point light here, that one. Let's make it 10, so it's quite bright. I'm just going to move it just so it's just unshot a bit. There we go. Because there's this really bright light smack bang in that corner. Now what happens when you've got a really bright light source behind an object, it's like the light kind of wraps around it, which I kind of talked about. I think I talked about that last week. And so it's kind of this technique of taking the really bright areas and actually blurring it and putting it over the edges of parts of the objects. I believe this will, yeah, well it is actually, it's a post-rendered effect. And it's currently switched on, so I don't know if we'll see it immediately or not. Yeah, I think we are. Okay, see, so if I switch this off, see how it's kind of bleeding around it? It's a bit slow at clicking it in and off. Okay, if we go over the top, right, so let's go radius. Actually, no, we'll go amount. It's 100%. Oh, that's radius. So that's how big the effect will be. And this is how much of it. Now if you go overboard, it does this weird, strange banding sort of effect. Let me do it. It's because I've got this fully interactive. If I had that switched off, then I can just grab this, increase it, and hit preview. There we go. See, now you will, it's not that obvious here. You see this kind of like strange lines forming? What I'll do is I'm just going to drop something much more solid in the foreground. Chin, 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 chin. So it's as if the light's hitting the lens and making it glow. And so any object there, you'll actually, any solid object, whoopsies, you should be able to see that glow going over the top of it. If you go too much though, which is what we're about to see, it does this weird banding thing, see that? So you don't want that happening because it kind of gives away the game. See, it's almost like this strange horizontal lines. And so usually you'll find that if you drop this to 50% or less, that effect disappears. Okay, and reducing the radius again, less than 50% is good. So that will just minimize it. See, it's kind of like a powder blue through here. Might have to actually hit preview. Okay, and if I switch that off, okay, you can see the difference. See, very sharp, very high contrast. Turn it on, and the light's kind of bleeding through areas where you'd expect it to kind of bleed through. It's a little bit more obvious when you have like, you know, the big huge sunset in the background or something. Alright, so let's go and illuminate a scene now, eh? I'm just going to delete that, and I might save this as, oh hang on, I've gone through all those things, haven't I? Sorry, I've been interrupted so many times. Oh, that's right, the influence. Now this is a pretty cool technique, and I'm going to show you a cool way of making up a scene, right? So actually we'll save this one. So it's using a combination of everything that we've seen so far. Hang on, where are we? N6340 class 10. We'll call this lighting. Okay, so I'm just going to do a new scene here. So I'm just going to start off with the default scene. And I'm going to just kind of put 3 mountains into my scene. Okay, so there's mountain number 1. Actually, no, we'll do one mountain where we are. Just like as if it was the foreground, I suppose. Might just make this a little bit flatter. Okay. So there's my foreground. I'm going to stick an ocean in just because I like oceans. They make nice reflections. And I'm going to lift up my sea so that it just engulfs the bottom of my mountain. So here's one. Now we're going to create another mountain over here. Alright. And another mountain over here. This isn't going to be a spectacular looking scene, to be honest, because I'm doing it too fast. Okay, and let's say a third mountain over here. Alright. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to duplicate my sun. So I'm going to have one sun is actually going to illuminate my whole scene, and then I'm just going to duplicate it. So Command D, and I'm going to say to this sun that it will illuminate all objects except the one, no, only objects marked below. So this is going to illuminate my ground and my sea and this foreground terrain. Right. This sun is going to illuminate terrain 2. Let's get none. Terrain 2. I'm going to duplicate that. And this is going to be terrain 3. Duplicate that. And terrain 4. Alright. Actually, I should actually have one more, but anyway, I'll show you why. So, now, oh, hang on, I've got to go final render quality, render to screen, enable relighting, 800, yep, cool, render. So, here's my very simple scene. Now, what's cool about this technique is, what I can do is go and adjust the lighting on each hill. Okay, so here's my ambient. But yeah, see this sunlight here actually does everything. So that's why I usually actually would have one more light. Let's go duplicate that one. He's going to illuminate the ground, the terrain, and the sea. Alright. It's kind of my foreground, if you like. And the main sunlight is going to illuminate apparently nothing. Let's render that again. So you do your huge big render that takes forever to process or whatever. And now I can control not only the brightness of the background, right? Let's stick this onto fully interactive. Okay. But I can also adjust the color. So if I wanted to make the sky kind of more orange, boom. Okay, it is a hue shift, so it looks a bit weird and alien, but it's kind of cool. Yeah. Then I've got this one here. So again, I could kind of maybe make this blue. Yeah. And I can adjust its brightness. This is looking just really weird and pathetic. Okay. I think the main problem is this, isn't it? There we go. Yeah, maybe that this one here is a little bit sort of pasty purpley colour. Yeah, but I can actually, you know, darken those mountains, and I can treat them all separately, which is pretty cool. And here's sunlight 3 for the foreground. And here's my ambient light. Yeah, so I've got so much control over it. So there's my original rendering, and here's my new one. Pretty cool, eh? So yeah, so you can actually individually light everything, and you could also make it much more complex as well. So remember before I was saying you could have a light, let's say I create another parallel light. So here's this sunlight over here, okay, and I'm going to just beam this in, so it's kind of coming from a separate angle. And this one though is going to cast no shadows, okay, and it's going to influence, well, just these things, okay, so it'll influence everything in this case. And let's hit render. Now it appears as if I've overexposed my shot. I probably should have actually dropped it down by default anyway, but now I've got another light which is kind of like a fill. So I can actually play around with the fill, and I could even, like, let's say this is like a kind of a weird deep blue color. Okay, so I've got like this another whole way of playing around, although it looks a bit weird. There we go. Okay, so I've kind of got this fill light now that I can play around with. Okay, if I switch it off completely, that's before and after. There's no shadows cast by it, so I don't get any shadows from this mountain like as if there was a massive big sunlight or something. But I have got a way of tweaking all of the colors and lights and mountains and everything all individually, which is pretty cool. So you can kind of add a lot more depth to your scene. Yeah. I mean, previously it looked really flat and boring. Kind of cool, eh? You can kind of see my ground plane. That's alright. So yeah, I might speak. So you can actually change the brightness, which is really weird. I thought you could. No, see, there's no controlling over it. It's just boom. It is what it is. All right. How long has that been? 54 minutes. Let's go and light a scene. So I'm gonna go, and I've actually got a scene here that I've got somewhere. No, open. And is this my Homeland 6340 folder? Sort of. Class 10 McLeod Road. So here is, I'm not interested in saving that one. Blah 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 blah. Here's Alright, so here's my little scene that I've got going here. Now I think I've got a missing texture or something, have I? No, I haven't. Okay, so what I've done is I've actually cheated here a little bit because I couldn't see into my building, which is a common problem. So here's my siding, and what I've actually done, so here if I go and change this to smooth shaded, okay, so that's what I would have got, but see I need to see where I have to place my lights. Problem is that the wall is in the way, and so all I've done is I've selected this texture, which has selected all the objects, and changed it to wireframe, so now I can see straight through it. Alright, now I can see inside my scene. Now I've actually gone and created some lights in here. Let's just switch them on so we can actually see them. And I've got a camera in here as well. Uh-oh. And we got a crash. Zip, zip, zip. Be back. Alright, and we're back. So, you can see here's my kitchen. This is actually my house. And I've just basically arranged... I haven't actually replaced any of the textures. I think the only thing I did was I scaled that one down a bit. It's going to see this wood texture needs a bit of work. They all need a bit of work. But this is about lighting, not textures. So, now, ideally you want the lights in this case kind of hit the wall in a nice creative sort of manner. And I've also... let's just hit render on this. I'm not quite sure what the settings are at the moment. It looks like it's just using the standard lighting model. So standard lighting model in this case isn't going to work. Interior, we've got lots of light bouncing around. I think the sun's coming in at some particular angle. Yeah, we've got spotlights illuminating the deck, illuminating the bench. There's downlights, but there's no light spilling out, which just makes the whole scene look a bit weird. So I'm just going to cancel that. And first of all, what I'm going to do is actually I'm going to switch off all of our lights, right? And I'll just position my sun in a kind of more realistic manner. If I can see it. Here it is. And we have a north facing section. Oh, so it should be over there. And where are we on here? There we go. So let's say the sun's coming in. Actually, we'll make it a little bit more morning because that will light my kitchen a bit more. Alright. And let's just have a look at these lighting settings. So this is just normal default settings. Hit render. So it looks very flat and boring. We've got a little bit of light popping in here, but not really much at all. Which is quite realistic. My kitchen usually has to have the light on, just because it's set back a little bit. And let's just reposition this a little bit. Yeah. And if you hold down the command key, you can fine tune it. Okay. Let's see, what does that angle look like? Alright, just as I would expect, the light's beaming in through the windows and doesn't look very spectacular. It looks like all the lights are switched off, which they are. So if we're doing an interior scene, first thing I would do is switch on global radiosity and turn off this optimize for outdoor rendering, because we want the light to bounce around lots of times and it to look really fantastic. It's not over a huge area, so it's not too bad. If it was a massive forest, we would not want to do that. Alright, and with the radiosity switched on, it doesn't look very spectacular either. I mean, I could probably play around and try and overexpose this a bit, and we might get a bit of it back. Okay, just probably more realistic. There seems to be a bit of green light spilling in from the grass under the house. But anyway, you get the general idea. It needs work. So let's go and switch some lights on. I'm just going to put this back to 0. Hit OK. And let's see. So actually, I'll leave those lights as. So let's go and cancel. No, I won't. I'm going to delete them. We're going to do it from scratch. So first thing is, I need a downlight in here, right? So that's going to be a spotlight, and I'm going to use a quadratic spotlight, and I'm going to position that up near the ceiling here. I can't obviously go into the ceiling because then I'm going to have problems with the light getting cut out, so I'm just going to put it right smack bang in front of that. And whereabouts is that in the house? It needs to be over here a bit more. See, so this pine here, so this is what I usually do, is it just goes through here, right? It's one of these pines, looks like that one, and just go wireframe. I might make my floor disappear as well though. Still can't see in here, can I? Also, if I go and find, yeah, the light fitting, there you go. So you can actually see where my light fittings actually are. So I've actually placed these accurately. So I can actually just see that these need to be over here a bit more. Whoopsies, did I move that? No, that's good. Just move that over a bit more. I could just look up and see where the light fitting is, but I can't see it. Oh, there must be a ceiling in there or something, is there? What would that be, like whitewash or something, I imagine? No. Yeah, that's us. So let's go and switch that to wireframe as well. Alright, now I can see exactly where the light fittings are meant to go. Yeah, obviously this isn't totally vital, but you get the idea. So that's one light. Now, at the moment, it's very powerful lighting. So it's probably going to be overboard. However, instantly you can see we've got a pretty cool looking result. A little bit better than I was expecting, to be honest. Doesn't quite look realistic, does it? Let's just do a proper render of this. Just see how it's coming out. Now I know that it's going to be too bright. So here goes our indirect lighting pass. Hang on, I'm just going to drop the resolution of this down. It's taking far too long. Yeah, render final. Render to screen. Yeah, render. I could enable relighting, but I'm going to make lots of changes anyway. I want to actually see what the real result is. Okay, and now comes through my next pass, and that light's not working. Oh, because I put it on a layer that's switched off. There we go. Alright, that's a little bit more what I expected. Okay, so now I've got this huge big spotlight inside my house, which is bright enough to illuminate something 100 meters away. And as you can see, it's having quite the effect. And here's the lighting pass. Okay, and so you can see I've got issues. Alright. So I would have to drop that down, which I was expecting anyway. So let's go and drop that down. Also, I want it to have a bit more spread. Okay, but I want lots of fall off on it. Okay. And I'm going to drop that down to, let's say, 15. Now once we've got one light again, we can just go and duplicate them all around the house. Got to remember that there might be a bit of overlap, so they should be a little bit dimmer more than anything. That's already looking a lot better. Now if you do a quality boost on your radiosity, it'll improve the lighting model. You can see it's still quite bright, so I might drop it down a little bit more. But look at this, looks awesome. That is really does look like my house. It's kind of freakish actually, but you can see where the light's hitting, it's still far too bright. So maybe we drop this down to about 5. Cool. And I'm going to make him actually slightly warm, because I usually have a tungsten coloured light in that position. This is never a very good idea, because it doesn't do the indirect illumination at the same time. Okay, that's looking pretty good, because I wouldn't expect this light pointing down here to do much illumination up here. Looking good here. Okay, this is looking good. So let's go and duplicate this a few times. So we've got another light fitting over here, and another one over here. Okay, and another one over here. Actually, I know there should be one halfway. Don't know why I haven't got one there, but anyway, I'm going to put one there. Alright, so there's my lights across that edge of the room. Now I've also got some over in the kitchen, and I don't know why. I think one day I decided I bought the wrong kind of lights, and I put daylight bulbs in the kitchen, and I really liked it. And daylight bulbs are a slightly blue colour. It's kind of cool. Kind of makes the kitchen look, I don't know, almost hospital-like. It's getting a bit difficult to see, but I know there's another one over here somewhere, and another one over there somewhere. Alright, so let's see what that looks like. Alright, so there's my indirect. The indirect is looking awesome. Excellent. Okay, we're slightly overexposing, and so I could do something about that. So it looks like I need to kind of just dial everything down a little bit. See if I did that. But what I reckon, what I kind of need is that the the throw on these lights is too far. So let's see. If I go and take all of these lights here, right, and we go to its settings. In fact, all you do, if you just click one of these, it should pop up. So we've got shadows, that's all cool. We could try using shadow maps as well. We could try that later. We can go to custom here, right? And then I can say that I want the light to go, let's say 3 meters. Okay, so should just reach the ground. And I want it also, I'm going to make this, I'm going to edit this a little bit. Oops. Edit the filter. And I'm going to make it so that it's kind of like dies out, but it's quite bright at first, so if it kind of hits something. I'm going to smooth all this out too, so it looks kind of like, yeah, kind of like that. Might have to increase that to 4 meters. Okay, that's a good indicator. So I want to try and reduce the amount of light hitting the ground. Shouldn't be so bright. There's my indirect. Might have to increase that to 4 meters. Might have overdone it. See, looking cool up here, looking cool over there. But yeah, see, it's not quite, it's hitting the table quite nicely, but it's not really hitting the ground properly. And so we'll just go lighting, let's make that 4 meters. Yeah, not bad. Okay, now the lights are a little too sharp, so I could soften those off. The whole scene could be brightened up a bit. Oh, it's actually on -1, there we go. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with the quality of the lights. Now I just need to make it look a little bit more realistic, so I'm going to shadow map the whole lot. Alright, so oops, that's all those, we'll go to the shadows. I don't know why I'm zooming out all of a sudden. Use a shadow map. I'm going to ray trace the shadows. Sorry, use a shadow map. That's going to, I'm going to up that to 1024. Cool. And we'll go with that. I'm not sure why isn't that lighting up. Oh. And hit OK. You'll probably actually see it do a pre-pass. See that? That's actually where it's, well, in this case it's doing the radiosity, but you'll see it do another pre-pass for the shadows as well. Okay, that's looking really nice now, so we're getting kind of this little bit more of a much softer shadows. It's looking pretty cool. Probably the only thing I really want to do is maybe just, I think I might have overbaked it a little bit. See, this is quite harsh and then this is gone. So I think I might have overdone it a little bit. Let's just see that again. Not quite sure why. We go enable volumetric lighting, right? But we're not going to do this shadow mapped. I'm not quite sure why. This is all grayed out for some reason. It might be because we're doing this. No. That's really weird. Why would that be? Well, let's do a ray traced shadow map. I don't need the volumetrics on now, but oops. Oh, am I on final quality? Yeah, render, final. Yeah, yeah, so now I've got volumetric lights. That's looking kind of cool, but you can see they need to be much softer. I think if we just actually change these to be soft lights, and that's probably what my problem is. So let's give that 5 degrees of softness, and I think we'll be done. Let's just switch off the volumetrics that way. Or maybe we can have them, but maybe it's just really subtle. Ah, there's our... Yeah, okay, so now we go shadow mapped. 1024 light-based object, yeah, dispersion 0.2. There we go. So that should be my lighting done. See, if those weren't in shot, it would look quite good. But because they're in shot, it looks a bit wrong. Or if I made the lighting fittings more realistic and that they were actually, you know, a small cone, like a tube, and the light was coming out of it. Yeah, again, it's possibly too soft now. But this looks really cool. Obviously, textures still need a lot of work. I think that softness is just a little bit overdone. If we turn that down to about, let's just make it 2 degrees, right? And check that out. Actually, I'm going to stop that for a second. I'm actually going to change it back to ray traced shadows, because I think it needs to be a little bit harsh. Oops. Blah, 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 blah. Shadows, let's change it to ray traced. And blah, 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 blah. Yeah, let's go with that. Now there's actually another type of light in my lounge as well. I've also got these kind of big lights over in the lounge, and they're actually like a dimmable light, and they're behind glass. They're not a direct down light like these ones. Alright, that's looking cool. Yeah, so the shadows are relatively harsh. I've got some visible light happening there. But yeah, over to the corner here, see these guys up here? These lights, that one's in the bedroom I think, they're actually kind of like a frosted glass. So what I'm going to do with those is I'm going to turn them, oops, I didn't want to render that. I'm going to turn them into, what do you call it? Area lights. So let's just collapse this. I'm going to create a new layer because I want to be able to just switch off some set of lights. So I'm going to call this layer down lights if it will let me. And this one here, the lounge lights. Now, what I need to do is find that, which should be easy because they have a frosted glass somewhere. So hopefully, is it my lamp? No, those are the actual lamps. I see, I think that's the actual. What is that? No, it's not what I want anyway. One of these. Yeah, here we go. See, so these are all actually lights, and all I'm going to do, so here it is here, is I'm going to go, I might actually duplicate them first, just because I can't undo this, because I might decide, that's not working for me, I want to make it just a frosted glass and put a point light in it. So I might actually duplicate this object first, right? So there is all those lights, yep. So I'm going to go duplicate. There it is. And I'm going to move this into my lounge lights and switch that one off. Okay, because I don't want them to render. In fact, I don't want to see them either. Alright. So now these ones here, I'm going to go right click and go Object, Convert to Area Light. Boom! Too bright. Luckily these lights are dimmable. And they're going to be slightly orange. And we'll close that. Yeah, that's looking nice. Alright, and so now if I get a kind of a nice shot of the lounge, maybe from the sunroom over here. Something like that. And we hit render. Obviously this is going to take a little bit longer because I've got lots of soft lights and area lights and that sort of carry on, which again, if it was an exterior scene and there was lots of trees and foliage and lots of polygons and that sort of carry on, it'd be murder. However, this scene's got 80,000 polygons. It's a very limited scene, you know, you can't see that far into the distance, so the lighting calculations are pretty simple really. Here's my indirect lighting pass, including my lamps. So if you import a lamp, you can just select the glass and then turn that into an area light. Okay, that's looking pretty cool. And here goes my actual illumination pass. Now, as you can see, I'd have to really boost the quality of the radiosity to get this to look better, if you like. And the way I would do that is if I go into here, into here, the atmosphere settings, you can go in here, see it's got quality boost. So let's give it +2. That's going to increase the number of rays that are basically being shot into my scene. It's also going to increase my render time and all that sort of stuff. You'll actually see in here, if you click this little triangle, it'll tell you everything about your scene. So if you're wondering why it's taking so long to render, if it will let me, you click on that and it will pop down and it will show you how many soft lights you've got in there and area lights and things like that. So if you're doing an exterior scene, of course you'd want to avoid having area lights and soft lights and that sort of carry on, so you could just switch it off. Anyway, I'm going to let that render. I'll probably render it at a higher resolution as well, and we'll call that a day. Anyway, so that's lighting, especially good for interior scenes, but also night scenes as well. So if you're doing parks or courtyards and things like that, they're all artificially lit. You can use a combination of these techniques to illuminate your scene and just make them look much more spectacular. It really is about lights. Lights is everything. That's what this program is doing. It's tracing light rays around your scene, so if you get your lighting just right, it's going to look really spectacular. Anyway, until next week, I look forward to seeing your architectural renders. Well, that's during about a week's time, so yeah, I'll be looking forward to it. Anyway, till then, see you.